Parents, the following program is intended for people over the age of 13. If your kids are younger than that, please use the YouTube Kids app.
Welcome to Scary Stories, the channel that tells you scary stories.
Peter Bernard's Scary Stories for Adults.
Welcome to Scary Stories NYC. I'm your old pal Bigfoot. As some of you may know, we had a poll on YouTube yesterday asking you guys what you wanted this episode to be about. 53% of you voted for 3 all-new DOGMAN stories, so that's exactly what we've got in this show today. I know some of you like to request Bigfoot, ghost, and vampire tales, but when we put them to a vote, DOGMAN always beats them by a mile. Plus, we get more DOGMAN submission stories than anything else too. Before we go any further, I'd like to announce that today's executive producer is Sarah Sparhawk. Thanks, Sarah. We're genuinely grateful to you for sticking with us for so long. We literally couldn't do this show without the help of kind and generous people like you. And if any of you watching would like to become a Scary Stories executive producer like Sarah, just join our very affordable Choose Your Own Level paid subscribers club at peterbernard.com. You get same-day access to over 7 hours of secret and uncensored scary stories available nowhere else in the world. And now, onto our first of 3 scary DOGMAN stories. This one was sent in by an anonymous viewer who allegedly lives in Massachusetts, where he claims to have seen a dinosaur. Oh no, wait, a DOGMAN. DOGMAN, that's what I meant to say. This entire episode is about DOGMAN, most especially this first story, which we call the Hanover HOWLER, or Fire Siren DOGMAN. Dear Scary Stories NYC, when I first moved to the neighborhood we currently live in, near Hanover in Massachusetts, I noticed that whenever the fire siren would go, there would be a dog howling along with it. If you didn't listen consciously, you might not even notice it, because the dog was trying to harmonize with the siren. But although this dog could really make loud and long howls, it could never maintain howling as long as the siren would, and it was at those moments when it caught its breath and started howling all over again that you could notice it most easily. I was invited to a neighbor's party to welcome me to the block, and to make conversation, I asked him about the dog that howled along with the fire siren. I was wondering if I was the only one who noticed it, or if it was a local legend, or if maybe he even knew whose dog was doing that. It turns out that when I broached the subject, my neighbor's eyes widened, and people stopped talking to turn and stare at us. That's not a dog, I was informed. When you hear that howl, someone else suggested, you better calculate how far it is away from you, then plot your course back inside, behind the locked doors. They all had straight faces. None of them seemed to be joking. I was searching my brain, trying to think of another kind of animal besides dogs that howl, and I couldn't think of any. Then, bing. Wolf, I asked. Is it a wolf? Something like that, someone said, and I was offered some French fries and a change of conversation. So, although people were generally friendly toward me and each other, there was a strange undercurrent going on at the same time. This was one of those towns with secrets like from old novels. I tried to shrug it off and forget about it, but each time I would hear the siren go, I would listen for that howl. It was not a very large town, so I would only hear it every month or two, but each time I would hear that, whatever it was, howling along with the siren, and each time I would estimate what direction it was coming from and how far away it was from me. Then I would plot my course back towards safety behind locked windows and doors. There came a night, a warm night in late spring, that I sat out in the back of my backyard, staring at the forest and listening to the leaves blowing in the wind. I had endured a particularly stressful day, and my mind was melted and fuzzy. I just needed to meld with the wind and those trees and enjoy some peace for a little while. Then I knew eventually my brain would reboot and I would be back to normal. It had worked for me before, but when I tried it before, my meditation and relaxation were not interrupted by the DOGMAN. I was trying to attain what they call mindfulness, but I found instead that my mind was drifting between preoccupations with the hard day I just had and pure static. I was not listening silently to my present moment. I was either commenting in my head about stuff that had already happened, or I was blanking out entirely. There was a very low level of awareness there, so low that I only noted subconsciously when I heard that fire engine siren, wailing, off in the distance. It didn't come to my conscious mind until I had fallen backward and landed on my butt on the grass, in shock, after the dog howl I heard came from literally less than 10 feet away from me. Climbing slowly and quietly back up to a standing position, I craned my neck to see behind the patch of trees that I heard the ear-splittingly loud sound coming from. I was wondering what I would see. This had to be the Hanover HOWLER. This had to be the dog or whatever it was that I'd been hearing all along. What was it that my neighbor had said about it? I asked if it was a wolf, and the guy said, something like that. Something like a wolf. What is something that is like a wolf, but not a wolf? I would answer dogs or coyotes, but this was clearly something that the neighbors were more afraid of than those kinds of creatures. Something they were too scared about to even openly discuss in front of new neighbors. Think about that. Not only would they not discuss this with strangers, but they wouldn't discuss this with me after I had moved onto their block. Let that sink in. No amount of craning my neck was working. I was going to have to actually walk a couple or 3 steps around, closer to the howling thing, taking a risk that it would see me and decide that catching me was more interesting than singing harmony with a fire engine. Coming around the side of those trees was really the keystone moment in my life. It had all led up to that, and now everything since then has proceeded from it. It feels as though my entire life always revolved around it. I saw something like a special effect from a movie, but a lot smellier. It had the most massive chest, which expanded to the size of 2 or 3 men wide as it inhaled. Then the bellowing which followed slowly emptied the lungs inside them as it balled its paws into fists and exerted so much effort that the veins were standing out from under its sleek, shiny, short black fur on its neck, forehead, and flexing arms. It was mostly facing away from me, and so I continued to risk staring at the thing. Longer. It had a tail. A long, thin, whip-like tail. It had broad, wide shoulders like a human weightlifter. It possessed a black, wolf-like head, triangular ears, long snout, frightening fangs and teeth. The muscular legs were shaped like the hind legs of a dog, but with much larger paw pads. The postures it made reminded me far more of humans than dogs or wolves. This was a kind of a hairy man-dog, more than it was a dog-man, I think. I knew that what I was seeing was impossible. It felt like heightened reality. I don't know if that was more because of my surprise and the adrenaline pumping through me from my abject fear at being so close to something that looked like the Hulk got bit by a werewolf and smelled like it had rolled in something rotten. Maybe it was because I really had entered some kind of altered reality, or maybe I was peering into one and hearing it as well. Could this have been a holographic projection? A hallucination? Was it really happening? Or was my nervous system being tricked somehow? And is there a measurable difference between those anyway? I was lost in asking myself those kinds of questions and searching intensely for the answers by watching the thing, hearing the thing, and smelling it too. I had figurative diving gear on and I was swimming deep in my intellectual notions, all the while with an apparent carnivorous predator towering over me just a few feet away. He stopped his howl, suddenly and unexpectedly. I jumped in the air, realizing I had pushed it too far. As I turned to run, I saw the great beast sniffing the air. He had smelled me. I knew I'd blown it, but I ran anyway. I knew I probably didn't deserve to get back inside, and it would be a long shot anyway, but I'm the only me that I've got, so I put my all into bucking the odds and getting back inside before the man dog did something to me that would probably be painful and permanent if I even lived through it. I was crying so hard when I locked that door behind me that I couldn't see straight for a minute or two. I remember weeping openly and wailing like a sad little child as I ran around the house, trying to see clearly enough to tell if the monster was outside of any of the windows. I don't know how far it chased me. Maybe it never did at all. I really have no idea what it did after I ran away from it. I haven't seen the thing since then, but I've heard it, just the same as before. So far, none of the howls since then have originated from near my house. I know it could happen again, though, so I've installed yard lights for when I'm out there after dark, and trail cams for when I'm not. So far, the Dogman has stayed away, and that's fine with me. It's my hope to never again see the Hanover HOWLER. Don't go away. We have 2 more scary Dogman stories right after this important word from PQ River.
You know what time is coming soon, don't you? The day of the wearing of the green skin. I'm inviting you to me St. Patrick's Day Dogman Party. The one and only Dr. Death St. Patrick's Day Scary Story Special. An extra long episode, and only us ghouls and ghosts and deceased individuals are invited. Oh, all right. You seem cool. You can come too. It all happens here on the Scary Stories NYC channel, Tuesday, March 17th. Feel free to arrive early. All my other guests are late.
The Dogman's howl is driving me crazy. Dear Scary Stories NYC, when my wife and I moved to our current home, where we plan on spending the rest of our lives, I saw something lurking outside. That strange, dog-headed something has prevented me ever since from ever feeling comfortable in my own home or our neighborhood. This has led to strife and quarreling in our marriage because my wife Florence loves it here so much. If only she had seen what I saw, then she might understand why. The Dogman's howl is driving me crazy. I have to admit, I understand why Florence likes it here. I did too at first. and if it weren't for our title cryptid, I would still love to live here. I had my face-to-snout encounter with that beast the very first week that we moved in. I had set up a hammock because I had wanted one since I was a little kid. Part of why I agreed to buy this place was that there were trees I could hang a hammock between all the way at the back of the yard by the forest. As it turns out, hammocks are not quite as heavenly to lie in as they looked on Gilligan's Island, so I was fidgeting and trying to learn to balance myself and stay on top of the thing when something absolutely monstrous stumbled clumsily out of the woods, kicking things all over the place and breaking several branches off of trees in the process. This wasn't like an animal came up to me. It wasn't like a bear, not even a crazed or diseased bear. This was like something walked out of a nightmare and went boo to me, right in my own backyard. I fell backward out of the hammock, landing with a thud. My left foot was tangled somehow in the end of the hammock, which I must not have strung up there correctly. I was on the ground, my foot in the air, and this massive, sick-looking monster thing was looking down at me. Imagine the scariest thing you ever saw in your worst nightmare. Then, imagine this big, nauseating smelling dog-headed demon thing walked up to that nightmare and asked it to hold his beer. This dogman looked like he was left in the oven too long, and he was kind of melted in some spots and burned in others. It was not a pretty sight, and the smell was so bad, it made me feel seasick. The eyes literally glowed like they were burning coals. It was not a normal creature. It was like something that walked out of somebody's interpretation of hell. I don't remember running inside. I don't remember how I got away from the thing. I only remember the feeling of insanity overwhelming me after seeing it. I remember the nauseating realization that the world didn't actually make sense after all. Logic was us contenting ourselves with rules we could pretend the universe worked by. But there's no real logic. There isn't even any real sanity. But you know what there is? There is a dogman with coals for eyes, and he came to my own yard to make it clear to me that he doesn't like me. How did I untangle my foot from the hammock? I don't know. How did I escape something twice my size that could obviously outrun me even on my best day? I don't know. If I did, my answers would only be logical assumptions anyway, and there's nothing logical about the dogman. Ever since that day, my marriage has suffered. I can't sleep well at night. I get awakened every single day by the howling sound of that thing. Florence hears it sometimes too, and tells me it's just a dog or a wolf. She acts like I'm crazy, and sometimes even tells me that, out in the open. Sometimes that dogman will wake me up by tapping on my window in the night. I wake up and I look out, but he's already gone. He must think that's funny. Other times, he'll scratch at the walls until I wake up, and he knows how hard it is for me to get back asleep while he's scratching out there. My theory as to why he didn't just take my life that first encounter is that he's sort of farming me. I think that monster creature lives off of fear. He only needed me to see him once to become traumatized and damaged by him. Knowing he lives in the immediate surroundings causes me to fear for both my wife and myself. I think he feeds off of that too, and I think he feeds off of me fighting with my wife. Most of all, I think he feeds off of my growing despair and increasingly fractured mind. None of my relatives or neighbors believe me either, and everyone treats me like I'm out of my mind. This, in turn, makes me feel genuinely crazy. That feeds my depression, which feeds the thing, and weakens me, allowing the insanity to gain a stronger and stronger foothold. It's a downward spiral that I'm not sure how to stop if my wife won't allow the possibility of us moving away from here. I wish she would take pity on me because the Dogman's howl is driving me crazy. The Super 8mm Dogman. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I might be the first werewolf to write you about seeing a werewolf. What I mean is, I once played a dog-headed monster in a home movie, then later saw what I think was an actual Dogman in that same forest many years later. When I was a kid, I once played a wolfman-headed monster in my older brother's Super 8mm silent film masterpiece entitled The Return of the Wolfman-Headed Monster. He told me he was calling it The Return, even though it was his first film, because people don't start respecting a franchise till its second or third installment. He also thought that calling me a wolfman-headed monster instead of just a wolfman not only sounded more sophisticated, but allowed him to allow my hands to look normal and save money on wolfman gloves. We already had an old wolfman mask, so he put that on me, and I was the star. My brother came up with my grand entrance one day when he saw me climbing in and out of a large hole in a tree behind our house. He had me climb in, put on the werewolf mask, then hold up an easily breakable piece of balsa wood over the hole, so it looked like the hole in the tree was filled. Then, I would smash the wood open from the inside and climb out of the tree toward the camera. It was quite memorable, which is why I was so sad to learn that the film was lost in a house fire that gutted my brother's house back in our hometown, where he still lives to this day. I went to visit him during his hard times, and one day, we went for a walk in the woods where we had shot the old wolfman-headed monster movie. What happened then is something that ended my friendship with my older brother. He insists it never happened, while I'm telling you that it actually did. While we stood by that tree that I had once jumped out of, discussing how I could never fit in there now, out of the woods trotted the largest big brown dog I've ever seen. It had long, shaggy fur hanging off of all of it, and had kind of sleepy eyes and a long tongue hanging out and panting. Even though it was acting friendly, it was just so large that I was terrified of the thing. My brother was even more frightened than I was, and he tried to shoo the dog away. It kept approaching, so he shouted louder and more angrily, and he threw some pebbles and sand at the thing. This enraged it, and it stood up on its hind legs, which must have made the thing 13 or 14 feet from the tip of its tall ears to the end of its long bushy tail. This dog roared louder than a lion. It was like a freaking dinosaur with fur screaming at us. We ran, and we got away. So that's really the story right there. It was so large, and it stood up on its hind legs, so it had to have been the Dogman. The Dogman is sort of like a werewolf, and the thing literally came to visit us at the tree that I once played a werewolf inside of. It's just so freaky, almost like the spirit of that Super 8 film itself came to say hi, and we hurt its feelings by telling it to go away. But my brother was right to do that. He was right to shoo away the werewolf or Dogman or whatever you want to call it. Once the film was lost in that fire, it became a thing of the past. If you try to bring back things from the past, things that belong back there, they can only come back in the form of monsters. It's better to leave them where we can remember them and cherish those memories. Otherwise, you end up with the Super 8mm Dogman. Hey, it's me, Henry Lee Dogman, here to thank those of you who support all of us here at Scary Stories NYC. It really helps us if you click like and if you forward our videos or leave cool comments. If you can, it helps us even more when you let us share our 25 episode and growing collection of uncensored, scary Dogman stories with you by becoming a paid subscriber at peterbernard.com. That's right, join our monthly club and get 25 stories right off the bat, each of them wilder than what we're allowed to tell you on this channel. Then, each Sunday, get another new scary story, usually a Dogman story, but always uncensored and secret, available nowhere else on the planet. Please consider joining us today at peterbernard.com and keep the scary stories coming. Thanks, everyone.
If you enjoyed this, please click like or consider subscribing. Remember to click the bell icon or you won't get notifications. If you want to listen to Bigfoot's secret uncensored story each Sunday, just go to peterbernard.com and become a paid subscriber. See you tomorrow. Same dog time, same dog channel.
Come back for more scary stories.